Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Intangibles Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Xavier Tar. Today, Haleem takes us back to the very beginning, the first idea of Tiger Tales, and then brings us along the way to tell us about the alchemy of awesome individuals and ideas that were formed after. So let's dive in. What we know now is 5-6 years later that your meeting with Alex and Corey helped form Tiger Tales. I was wondering if you could talk about the experience of that as well.
For sure. Now, for our listeners who might not know me, I did both my bachelor's degree and my MS PhD combined at RIT. So I was there forever. And and sometimes it's when you try to get like a PhD, it takes such a long time that, you get into what they call like the belly of the beast. Like you can't see a way out. You're not able to find that idea that's going to help you write your thesis. And it's really something that you can't do on schedule, right? It needs to happen before you can actually be called a doctor. But I do remember I was getting tired of being on campus myself. But there were professors from my undergraduate. Sometimes I would run into them in the hallway and they would look at me like, please tell me you've graduated and you're teaching here now. But the reason I say that is I spent my undergraduate and graduate year in RIT. And throughout my undergraduate, I was, like any other undergraduate student, I didn't have much resources. So going off campus was a pain to get to a club meeting. But when I got to graduate school, I got a fellowship, getting a scholarship that allowed me to do my research. Now I was able to pay my rent and get a car, and I had freedom. But I realized many of the students on the RIT campus did not have that luxury of being able to drive to what they want to. I really wanted to see, okay, now I'm going to these Toastmasters club. I see a need for that on the RIT campus. It'll be nice to start it. But interestingly, the stories that we heard, and I'm sure Alex can confirm, was that there were several attempts at starting clubs at RIT that failed. Almost everyone we approached said some challenges with creating a club at a university because of the transient nature of the students and so on and so forth. Regardless, I think we were able to start a club, and 6 years later, now we're having this conversation. So obviously, we managed to do something right that allowed us to continue. And I would like to add that I think the solution to that transient problem, which I had a sneaky suspicion, was this. Yes, the club officers might change after a short period of time, but we need a cornerstone. We need something that can stay constant, that founds the foundation of the club. I couldn't have asked for a better foundation than Alex and Corey as a team. Corey and Alex became the first mentors. That gave me the confidence that, even if I leave, Tiger Tales is in some amazing hands. I had to move away from Rochester for work, and I'm sure a lot of students do eventually once they graduate. But I think without that founding connection, the common thread that runs from the origin of Tiger Tales until now is the mentorship from Corey and Alex and our friends there.
Thank you, Haleem. It's been such a joy to be a part of it. And with Corey being able to be there less, continuing to see all of the seeds that he planted along the way, growing up, even in this next generation, who some of them haven't even met him, but his influence on them. And I want to talk more about kind of what makes Tiger Tales different, what makes Tiger Tales the club that it is. But seeing those seeds grow up in this new generation of leadership and has been really an honor and a privilege.
I would agree. I don't know what forces were at work when Tiger Tales was being formed, but it was just an incredible coming together of very unique individuals from directions that we didn't expect to form Tiger Tales. When we were trying to put together the demo meeting, we had Alex, we had Greg Taylor, some of the community members from outside of RIT to run the demo meeting. We had Preeti, who has never given a speech in her life. And later on, the leadership team just had Mervyn, who is this very jolly people's person from Jamaica, and Rob, who is who's been a Marine, who's incredible leadership qualities, and his ability to make friends and make people laugh. It was just an alchemy of awesome individuals. And I think I was listening to Alex's podcast where he talks about, I love that phrase, energy of Tiger Tales. I think that was very, very unique. The other half of the equation is the unique members that come from the RIT community. They're, from Afghanistan, from Saudi Arabia, from all over the world, right? These unique personalities who are there and who are sharing their stories. I was on a high, let's just say that. When I attended a Tiger Tails meeting, I was high on Tiger Tails energy. And I've found it difficult to find that energy elsewhere. It's very unique to our club there.
Almost like before a meeting, you could walk in with lower energy, or it didn't matter where your energy was at, because by the end of that meeting, your motivation energy level would be skyrocketing.
Yes. Incredible amount of work in the background by individuals like Preeti, Rob, and the entire leadership team to put on that 1 hour meeting, but it was something to be a part of. And I think anyone who walked in as a guest was like, I'm signing up. We were like, yes.
Kind of spearheading it as the president. How did you get these people to come on board to join Tiger Tails and join Toastmasters in general?
I really don't know. These individuals, it was something within them. Perhaps I was able to just bring them to the same room. And I remember when we were trying to charter the club, and when it chartered, somebody had to pick the names of the officers and who's going to be officers. I didn't even volunteer, but people in the room ended up putting my name as the president, because I never thought of what I was doing as something that was like leadership. Like, this is just something we want RIT students to have access to this on campus. They don't have cars to drive to different clubs. So we want to create something on campus to help students with public speaking. It's a pain that I experienced as a student. I spent my 5 years of my undergraduate life virtually in silence because I was ashamed of my inability to speak. So I wouldn't speak much. Even though I would know all the answers, if the professor asked, I would be just silent. It was pain that I experienced myself that I saw was solved through Toastmasters. And I wanted to be able to try to bring that to our campus so other students, perhaps in a similar position, have some avenue to start working on that early on.
You came into leadership the right way, where you walk towards something that you want, and then you turn around and it turns out there's a whole bunch of people behind you.
Oh man, I remember I was like, I think you were in the room, you all volunteered me to like, nope, you're the president. I'm like, snap. I guess I'll take it. But incredibly, I mean, we're talking about so many things here. If beginning Tiger Tailors are listening, they're like, what the hell are these guys talking about? But part of Toastmasters' journey is, yes, we come in to become better speakers, but think about this. Where in our lives do we get an opportunity to be a president of something? Where in our lives do we get an opportunity to be a VP of education of something? Public relations, secretary, sergeant in arms. I have played all those roles throughout my years in Toastmasters. And if you leave Toastmasters, you realize when you're trying to start a company or be an entrepreneur or any of those things, you need all those things. You need a president, you need the VP of education, you need PR, you need secretary. Where else do you get an opportunity to make those mistakes, learn through experiences instead of just reading a book? Well, right there in Toastmasters, right? You work in your speaking and eventually you get involved with the leadership side. It's amazing. It's democratizing access to individuals to find their own voice and to find their own leadership, if you want to say that. Just yesterday, I was in another class trying to promote Tiger Tails and tell people what Tiger Tails Toastmasters does. Catherine was with me, she's smiling because she knows what happened. And everything was going well just until one guy raised his hand and he said, there are other free clubs on campus that help with communication skills. Why should I join Toastmasters? Guess what I did? And I realized that was a horrible response. There are going to be times where all of you are going to be put in that position. For example, you might go to an interview and an employer might ask, why should I hire you? What are you going to do? Don't do what I did. So it's critical that we understand what our philosophy is because it reflects in our responses. And the difference is this. If your philosophy is getting, you're going to toot your own horn, versus if your philosophy is giving. And if you're clear on what your philosophy is, your answer will sync well with the employer.
Was there a moment that you could pinpoint that you knew that Tiger Tails was going to be something maybe different from other clubs, but amazing?
I can talk about the technicalities, which I think were a part of it, but I would say definitely the unique mix of people and the culture we established early on that had some momentum that carried the club forward. I have already talked about the incredible people that were on the team: Preeti, Rob, Alex, Corey, and the teams that joined later. I'm drawing a blank on the names: Manas, Xavier, Catherine. Oh my goodness. So many amazing individuals, right? Without them, this is a null project. But I think one of the things that I gathered from being in Toastmasters, and you will probably experience this, is some clubs you go to, their club health-wise not doing so well from their membership. They have some incredible members who are super dedicated, but they almost always have a hard time filling the agenda. Then you go to other clubs that are completely, everyone is in a suit, they're on point, and you find variations in between. Having gone to like 15 different clubs to practice my speech, I always remember sitting and watching these different clubs, and I started noticing, oh, this club does this really well. Oh, this club does this really, really well. And I would make a note of that. And I was also a member of another club which wasn't doing so well. I put two and two together, and I realized if I'm going to start a club, I can't deal with these issues later. I have to deal with them ahead of time. So we established certain practices on how we fill our agendas, how we plan our meetings, how we train new members to take on the leadership roles, that ladder of starting small and working their way up to becoming the Toastmaster of the meeting. I think we were able to get members playing the role of a Toastmaster in record time. It took me 2 years in Toastmasters before I could even attempt the role of a Toastmaster. It was just so scary. So I think there were a combination of these practices that we established early on. And then there were certain constraints in running a meeting on campus that actually forced us to be better. I don't know if you've read this book called The Talent Code. It's about an individual who goes around the world and studies talent hotbeds. Why do we have so many amazing coming out of Russia? Why do we have so many good soccer players coming out of, let's say, Brazil? And he goes and studies these talent hotbeds and writes about it. And so he found that in Brazil, for example, people practice differently. They don't play on a full soccer field and have full games. In fact, they play a game called futsal, which is a smaller field, and the constraint makes it pass the ball. There's no way you can carry the ball for a long time and run around. So you're forced to develop that skill of coordinating and passing the ball, right? Because you've limited the space on which you're playing. I think, and they also played in sand and other aspects. But now when they get onto the big field, oh man, they're in a different world. They've sharpened that ability so much, which would not have been sharpened as much if they just practiced on the open field. I think with Tiger Tails, Rob and I initially realized students had to come into class and rush out. So we can't run the meeting all the way to the hour mark because they're going to be late for class. So we started this thing called the 55-minute project. We had to take out all the fat and learn how to run a meeting in 55 minutes where every minute was accounted for. Every minute was planned. There was no let's leave this to fate and figure out whether or not we're going to finish this meeting on time. After every meeting, we would say, okay, where can we save time? You know what's happening? We realized, I think this was Rob. He's like, oh, we lose time because we have a sign-up sheet at the door. Almost always in the beginning of the hour, there's a line of people waiting to sign in as guests. And that takes up 5 to 10 minutes. We can't start the meeting. Okay, what can we do about it? You know what? Create these cards with the same information, their name, their email, and we're going to place it on the desk. People can just walk in and sit straight where they need to. We don't need them to actually take up those 5 minutes up front, right? Small innovation from noticing what is the problem, what's stopping us from running this meeting in an hour. And that became a part of our practice. Now, instead of having a sign-in sheet, we consistently had those sign-in cards. And the benefit of that happened as such that this wasn't planned, right? You could collect all those cards, and for anyone that's a guest, you could hand that to the Toastmaster. And the Toastmaster in the meeting could literally use that card and say, oh, we have a guest here. Hey, do you have any thoughts and comments, right? That was one example of the practices that evolved through running Tiger Tails meetings in a shorter time frame. And other practices. Every week we would introduce some kind of time-saving tactic that would make the meeting no fat, maximum meat per minute. I'm sorry to all the vegetarians out there. I'm trying to think of other time-saving things we did, which were not common practice in other clubs. We realized that the Toastmaster of the day, especially if they're new, they're going to be introducing and calling the grammarian, the timer, speaker number one, evaluator. And it makes the job of the Toastmaster incredibly difficult if you have to hunt around the room to figure out who's sitting where. Sometimes people arrive right on the hour, so we don't know where they're going to sit. So we said, you know what? We're going to have designated plaques for Toastmaster evaluators, speakers, timers. Toastmasters knows exactly where they are. That spot is not going to be taken. And it just smoothens the meeting out, right? So these small, I think, adjustments that we added to Tiger Tails early on, I'm not sure if they're still in practice, but they really, I think, set the tone for effective meetings right from the go. And we just rode that momentum.
I think the urgency of the 55 minutes and the fact that every student on average has 6 months, a year, maybe 2 years with Tiger Tails. So the urgency to complete a CC or now to complete a level 1, 2, 3 as they go through pathways, that urgency is there. And I think that creates an energy where if somebody joins a community club, there's not a sense of, I'm going to have to leave this place. And so I need to get everything I can out of this club while I'm here. That sense of urgency that all of the students have, I think it adds energy. We've lost a little bit of the discipline of that 55-minute project. I'm excited for members to hear this and to remember that that's a part of our Tiger Tails DNA is that maximum protein per minute. We won't say meat per minute for our vegan friends. But getting it to that you are getting the maximum, whatever it is that creates that energy that when you leave the meeting, you feel like you can take on the world, like you can share your story in a new way.
Yes.
That feeling, that urgency is really a big thing, what makes the club what it is.
Yeah, there's a level of, let's say if it's a play, I think of the meeting as a giant speech. It's in itself. There's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes to put up the play. That the leadership team is like cued into that and it's facilitating that. And whoever gets up to speak is building on that stage that has been set by all of the prep work that went in by the leadership team. And even if we're not constrained by that 55-minute time limit, those practices still help, right? Some of those practices I realize still help. Yeah. And I think what you mentioned about the urgency of getting through the educational program, I'm glad I had you and Corey who had these ideas about speechathons. Me personally, I have been less by the book. I had less urgency in finishing, let's say, my speeches and getting to the next designation, which I wasn't necessarily motivated by that. So I think I was weaker in that area, but we have other individuals in the club who kept us honest, right? We had like you and Corey who said, hey, this is incredibly important. We need to get it done. And it got done. They call it unique ability teamwork. We team up because we have certain weaknesses and other individuals, are able to boost that up because we've teamed up. Now that weakness is no more.
Yeah. And then the other side of that is when we're meeting every week and it's almost not an expectation, but if you're going to be a part of Tiger Tails Toastmasters, you're speaking a good amount. So the amount of stories that you get to share with this audience in a given amount of time, you might be giving a speech a month. So between that story sharing and then what you were talking about, everything that goes on in the background to make these meetings happen, creates these deep connections that run outside of the 55-minute project.
To your point, both Alex and Xavier, they say regardless of what we're trying to learn, it could be judo, it could be swimming, and there's a term that comes from swimming, they call it time in water. No matter how much you read about swimming, unless you've spent a certain amount of time in water itself, that instruction is not going to stick. And getting people through those first 10 speeches or getting them through those tracks actually gives them that time in water for things to make sense. And it's important that is done sooner rather than later, right? You actually want to get that out because now you have reference experiences in the context of which the theory of public speaking makes sense. Without that, it's just, words.
I hope you guys all enjoyed today. Join us next week for our final part with Haleem. See you next time.